Dear friends, this is Ruslan Belov, and this is the daily combat operations briefing from the Ukrainian front. The front was incredibly active today. There's a lot of interesting news and events to talk about. Today the Russian army took several settlements, so get comfortable, we're starting. The first of them is located in Zaporizhzhia region, 2 more in Donbas, and the 4th settlement taken today is in Sumy region. I'll start my overview with the northern sector of the front, and then we'll gradually move south. Let's go from north to south and take a closer look at the successes of the Russian side and what they might lead to. So Sumy region, here the Russian army continues taking essentially any settlements near the border in order to expand the buffer zone. Today another settlement was taken, Mykolaivka. The Russian side is using a limited amount of resources here, and the intensity of fighting has actually decreased recently. Kondrativka, south of Mykolaivka, has also been taken by the Russian side. Further south along the H07 highway, the Russian advance is no longer as strong as we observed quite recently. By the way, as I've often said, one of the main objectives here, besides creating a buffer zone in Sumy and Kharkiv regions, is to draw AFU attention away from other fronts. That is, the AFU is forced to throw its units and FPV operators in here regardless, otherwise they'll simply keep losing one settlement after another. Wearing down the enemy is very important, and both sides of the conflict make use of this, but in a war of attrition, the side with more resources, as is often the case in life, always has more room to maneuver, more options, and so on. In the Kozasha-Lopan area, video footage has come in showing strikes on the positions of Ukrainian FPV operators. Here, by the way, we see a real classic. Ukrainian operators hide in tree lines, get spotted by Russian reconnaissance, and after that everything imaginable starts coming down on them, aerial guided bombs and regular FPV drones alike. Major problems are brewing for the AFU in the Kharkiv direction. It's being reported that Russian forces are having success tightening the encirclement ring near the settlement of Chorn on the eastern flank, and Russian troops have also been spotted in the area of Mykolaivka and Blahodatne. The Ukrainian side is still unwilling to withdraw its forces from the emerging pocket. There hasn't been objective control footage from here in a while, and we're very much waiting for it, though I understand that during active combat operations, nobody is particularly eager to post anything online, and the Ukrainian side for its part isn't showing footage from their end either. In general, we're waiting for data from this area, both from OSINT analysts and from those in contact with fighters on the ground. And here it's important to understand one thing. This entire area is essentially open fields and tree lines. If we take these small villages, for example, there's not really much for AFU units to hold onto here, and getting out is even harder. How do you withdraw when you'd have to cross open fields completely exposed to enemy drones? Almost nothing is left of the tree lines here. They've nearly all been stripped away by Russian artillery and drones, so overall AFU units have almost no chance of getting out of here. We've covered Kharkiv region, so now let's move on to Donbas. Here today there's progress by the Russian army on several sectors at once. Let's start with Mykolaivka, since important information is coming in from there. In recent days, we've often talked about strikes on Ukrainian logistics along the route out of Sloviansk toward Mykolaivka, and now information is emerging that Russian troops have indeed brought this road under fire control. That means most of the vehicles trying to move toward Mykolaivka along it aren't making it there. So soon as usual, we'll likely see a huge amount of burned out equipment along this road. A few positions in Mykolaivka are weakening significantly, essentially melting away before our eyes, and I'm expecting some interesting objective control footage from the settlement. It's also being reported that the Ukrainian side has lost its positions in the tree line areas here, and its presence in the sky has weakened significantly. The Russian side reports that Russian FPV operators here are using several times more FPV drones than the Ukrainian side. It could be said that the initiative here has now fully shifted to the Russian army's control. Now let's look at what's happened in the Kramatorsk direction. It's being reported that AFU reinforcements are arriving in the city in considerable numbers, with new groups constantly arriving. Major developments are expected here soon, so this isn't surprising. Fedorivka was taken today. Russian forces are grinding through the city's defenses, and they're actually giving way fairly easily under pressure. It seems things are so bad for the Ukrainian army in terms of infantry that there simply aren't enough people to man strongpoints. Many of them are left with no personnel at all, or with a bare minimum. Some Ukrainian military bloggers have said that across several kilometers of front there might be, figuratively speaking, a handful of people, something like 10 men per several kilometers of front. The front is essentially being held together by FPV drones, and I honestly can't even imagine what will happen if some kind of countermeasure against FPV drones is ever found in the future. After Fedorivka, the Russian army has two more settlements ahead of it, below Kuzminivka and Semenivka, and beyond that the sudden approaches to Kramatorsk itself. Today, from the southern part of Kramatorsk, along the H20 highway, we're getting objective control footage showing a large amount of destroyed equipment, and it's clear that anti-drone protective netting isn't doing much good either. In general, you can see what happens once a road comes under fire control, essentially a graveyard of equipment. It might seem like there's a paved highway right there, just push the front along it, but the reality of war is far from these kinds of assumptions. Good news is also coming in from the Kostiantynivka sector of the front. The Russian side has managed to improve its position in Osukov, and there's also Russian army progress in Izivka. In the fields around Zaporizhzhia, there are still small remnants of Ukrainian infantry. The AFU's position in Oleksivo-Druchkivka itself is deteriorating due to the systematic work of Russian aviation and reconnaissance in detecting AFU FPV drones. The situation for Ukrainian teams here has significantly worsened. They've lost a considerable number of crews here and have been forced to shift significant forces over to Druchkivka itself. The fields northwest of Mykolaivka are also being cleared, and the fighting in Rezhke is trending in the Russian army's favor. Druchkivka is essentially on the verge of the fighting beginning for the settlement itself. This will be among the largest cities involved since the start of the war. Also, important changes are coming in from the Dobropilya direction regarding Kucherev Yar. The settlement has come under the control of the Russian army. The Russian army has significantly stepped up activity here, and in my view the objective is a matter of reaching the borders of Donetsk region in this direction. There's still quite a way to go before reaching that border. By the way, from the border of Donetsk region to the city of Dnipro, it's only 117 kilometers, not that great a distance. If Ukrainian forces continue to weaken over the next few years, the Russian army could quite plausibly reach Dnipro even from this direction. So today, Russian forces managed to gain ground in this area, advancing south of Rezhke. Beyond that, their active attempts to approach Druchkivka continue from the direction of the settlements of Rezhke and Novoheryorivka. Russian forces also entered Novoheryorivka itself today. According to fighters on the ground, roughly half of this village is now under Russian control, with positions being consolidated. That means Russian forces have successfully crossed the Hruska River here and are already fighting for control of the settlement. Looking at the Dobropilya Bulge as a whole, Russian forces are also actively advancing here, continuing their push northward. If you recall, roughly a year ago, Russian forces managed to break through all the way to Zalaty Kolodias. At the time, that was a very serious breakthrough. In fact, this entire Dobropilya Bulge was formed as a result of that push, but back then the AFU pulled in elite units, national battalions and National Guard forces, and Russian forces were ultimately pushed back from there. Today, however, Russian forces are re-establishing control over those positions, and reports are now coming in that the settlement of Kucherev Yar has once again come under Russian control. So after all this time, persistent fighting has finally restored control over this section of the front. At the same time, Russian forces are again entering Zoloty Kolodias from the south and again pushing into neighboring Ruska. In short, following the massive breakthrough at Andriivka, Russian forces are now trying to finally cut off this entire pocket and physically reach the highway running from the city of Dobropilya toward Kramatorsk. Fighting is already underway in Dobropilya itself. As a reminder, the town is essentially fused with the settlement of Anivka, with no clear boundary between the two. Russian forces entered Anivka some time ago, and fighting is now taking place in the area of the sand quarry here, which AFU units are still clinging to, though Russian forces are actively pushing them out. Meanwhile, in the central part of Dobropilya, fighting continues for control of the Dobropilska mine located here. According to Russian OSINT sources, only about 20 AFU soldiers remain there, so the clearing operation is likely to conclude soon. Also a further clarification today regarding the area south of Dobropilya. For a long time, the status of the Bilitska mine, located near the town of the same name, remained uncertain. Russian forces appeared to have advanced further, apparently taking Chernihivka, Krasnoyarsk, Svitle and Vodiansk, but the fate of that particular mine stayed unclear. There were reports that isolated AFU groups were still hiding on the grounds of the abandoned Vodiansk mine. Today, however, comes confirmation that this area too has been fully cleared, with AFU units finally pushed out. Looking at this section of the front as a whole, the direction things are heading is becoming clear. In the near future, Russian forces are expected to attempt to seize the village of Dobropilya, cut off this entire bulge, and move fully into the town from the south in order to begin storming it as well. That covers the Donbas sector. Now let's shift to Zaporizhzhia region, where there's also plenty of news. AFU units entered Novosolon and Lyubitsky. The situation appears to be that Russian assault groups pushed significantly ahead, breaking into an area far removed from their main grouping and reported having taken these villages, but a forward advance to consolidate the area didn't materialize, which is why control there proved unstable and they were pushed back east. It now appears that the Russian army's immediate objective will be to close off these pockets that have formed, level out the front line to make it more stable, and then move forward on a broader front with a larger grouping toward the highway leading to Mykolaivka, restoring the positions lost today in order to fully cut the supply route into the city of Kharkiv and shift the situation there in Russia's favor. Today, the eastern grouping of forces announced that the settlement of Dolinka has come under the control of the Russian army. The Vostok grouping released objective control footage as usual. It shows footage of the fighting for the settlement, as well as footage of Russian troops spotted within the settlement itself. Russian forces have effectively reached the Verkhnya Tersa river here, meaning Ukrainian units will most likely now be forced to withdraw to the river line, since it's fairly wide at this point, and holding position here would essentially be a one-way road for the soldiers involved. In other words, the map here is likely to look noticeably different quite soon. I expect Russian forces to reach the river within a couple of days and will then need to force a crossing. After crossing, it would still take roughly 6 kilometers to reach the settlement of Omelnik, so the encirclement of Kharkiv will gradually begin extending to its eastern outskirts as well. Fighting is already underway inside Kharkiv itself. It's taking place on the southern outskirts, where Russian forces have already entered from the direction of Mala Tokmachka and Novodanivka. Fighters on the ground are reporting quite cautiously, understandably, that fighting is now occurring roughly in this area. Obviously, no one is going to broadcast the exact position in real time. Nobody wants to end up spotted by Ukrainian drones. But overall, it's important to understand that what's currently shown on the map, entry into just a few outlying streets, is no longer an accurate picture. Fighting is now taking place much closer to the center of the city. It's fair to say, with Some caution that the fate of the city and possibly the entire Zaporizhzhia front may be decided in the coming days, since once Russian infantry is already approaching from the east, storming the other settlements beyond Orikhiv will become significantly easier. That's the situation on the front as of August 24th. We'll continue monitoring it. Thanks again very much for your attention, dear friends.